First of all, welcome. Thanks for being here. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and keep up the the good work you're doing in the world in general. Some folks don't know you, Dr. Wrigley. Would you mind sharing a little bit of your background for the folks that haven't heard you before?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm assuming everybody can hear me okay? Good. All right. So my name is Dr. Jay Wrigley, and by trade, I am a functional medicine doctor who has kind of a specialty in working with hormonal related issues, mainly with women. That's becoming a lot more with men as well. But my background for the last 25 years is been working a lot with women that are either transitioning into menopause or have endocrine disorders like thyroid dysfunctions or whatnot. And to look at that from a metabolic health perspective and try to get them to correct these things without being, using just a pharmaceutical approach, but to look at what can be done by cleaning up the diet, a lot of times using more natural hormones than synthetic derivatives of those. But now this has kind of led me into the space, and how I got to know Shawn was that what I'm seeing, and I think that everybody here is seeing a little bit more of, is that in terms of, first of all, the healthcare industry has become nothing more than just disease management, in my opinion. And the offerings and the education that they're giving patients for a way to remedy health issues is poor at best. And what we're seeing is that the foundation of most of this is what one chooses to put into their mouth. And I think that a lot of us here would be in agreement that what we're finding is that a true ancestral diet for a human being is going to be prioritizing protein over anything else. And the most nutrient dense foods that we can to make available to ourselves are going to be things like ruminant meat and poultry and fish and eggs and these types of things, and organs of animals are going to provide the most nutrient density. Then whether people choose to add some condiments into their diet in the terms of fruits and vegetables is kind of a well, that's their option to do that. But I think that what I find, and I think that Shawn certainly promotes, is that to find out what your true diet is, probably the best starting point, and what we would see as the most effective elimination diet would be to start on a diet of complete animal-based, protein-rich, higher fat type of food for a period of time. And then from there, you might not even want to go back. And if you do, you begin to select what are those various plants that you tolerate extremely well that don't cause irritation. So anyway, all that being said, this is kind of the nature of the work that I do now, is to try to work with people still within a lot of hormonal issues, but at the same time, with the focus being on metabolic health and pushing people towards a more of an an animal-based diet as opposed to a plant-based diet.
Yeah, I mean, Jay, I kind of view a carnivore diet as kind of a sledgehammer approach. I mean, and if you've got to knock down a shed, you're going to use a sledgehammer. And a lot of us have that issue. And then there's some more more subtle tools, scalpels and, things like that, where you can screwdrivers and stuff like that, where you can, if that analogy holds up.
Right.
One of the things that, you mentioned, and a lot of people in here are female, probably half or more typically, are very interested in, like I said, carnivore diet, sledgehammer approach, but then you have different individuals and as you mentioned, your specialty is in these perimenopausal women. What do you see, and I know we've mentioned this before, what do you see the different with regards to nutrition or anything else that goes with that territory, I suppose?
Well, I guess the first thing that I would say is that I have to kind of take it back to that protein seems to be at the top of the list of what's going to help anybody get through any type of hormonal issues. And if we look at, you know, one of the most common that women are probably dealing with going through menopause and into early perimenopause and into early menopause is that they have a tendency to get some thyroid dysregulation. And there's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of it has to do with the declining of progesterone and still having too much estrogen maybe around that's blocking some of these receptor sites from thyroid hormone being able to get into the body to respirate that cell. Now, again, so one of the easiest approach to deal with a disorder like that is to understand how much the thyroid gland needs a high protein diet, and how one would do themselves a pretty big disservice by trying to eat more of a plant-based diet if they're needing to get more efficiency out of their thyroid, and if they're needing to convert T4 into T3 at a better rate and make it more metabolically active, that is going to rely on protein so much. So a lot of these times, a lot of these things, Shawn, that we can see that make these transitions into menopause so much more smooth is really just diet, is really getting them on a higher protein-based diet, dropping their carbohydrate back quite a bit, if not going completely carnivore for a while, or maybe even longer. But that helps the endocrine system so much that women just find the transition through menopause so much easier. To, like you said, if you go with the sledgehammer approach, those are the women that I see do really, really well without all the problematic things of the weight gain and the hot flashes and night sweats and the problems with libido and the, skin dryness or whatnot, are really helped by those rich foods, high in protein and high in good quality fats. And it's even better if they can add a little bit of organ meat in their diet to get those, essential vitamins that only are fat soluble. So I like that approach, and it works well. And then again, like you said, you can get out the screwdrivers if you need to. There are some, I work in the field of a lot of nutritional supplementation and natural products, and there are some things that can be very helpful to problematic women to reduce heat symptoms and things like that, or improve blood sugar balance or whatnot. But still, 99% of it goes back to what they're putting in their mouth and how they're eating.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was kind of doing a little multitasking here when you said high protein diets improve thyroid, and I really honestly hadn't looked into that or seen that. So I quickly saw a study out of Croatia, 4,000 people, and they saw that people that had higher protein and saturated fat actually ended up with much better thyroid function, lower TSH, higher free T3. And they had, and the diets that are associated with high glycemic index had the complete opposite effects. So that's an interesting little thing that I didn't know about. So thanks for showing me that. That's interesting. So,
yeah, for sure.
Let me ask you about, let's talk about protein. I mean, I'm a big protein centric guy. I think it's, strength training, lean muscle mass is extremely important. I've been, I know that we've got Ted Naiman coming on next week. He's obviously a big protein guy. And yet there seems to be a role for some amount of fat. Now the debate is, do you need a ketogenic amount of fat? Do you need less than that? What are your thoughts on fat to protein ratios? I mean, there's an absolute, first of all, what's the absolute amount of protein you need? Would you concur with 1.6 grams per kilo or 1 gram per pound, or does it vary depending on the person? And then what's the ratios typically look like?
Okay. I think it's all over the map because people are so individual, and so much of it comes down to physical activity. But if you just, for me, a bullseye is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1 to 1.5 grams of protein per lean muscle mass. So, you could do something like desired body weight by, taking a woman. I will take a woman sometimes and just go, look, if you're looking to weigh 140 pounds, you know, and we're going to think that a healthy body fat percentage for you and your lifestyle would be 20% body fat. So, you know, we remove the 28 grams, and so whatever that's coming out to be would be the minimum amount of protein. If you did 1 gram per that, what are we looking at? 128 grams. So again, I think that would be a good medium for a woman who weighed 160, wants to weigh 140. She should probably be shooting for about 128 grams of protein. Now that sounds like a lot, but it's really not. You know that. You know, I'm amazed at sometimes that people don't understand how much protein is in, you know, 12 ounces of a New York strip steak. It's probably giving you 90 grams of protein. So, you know, you add 2 eggs into your day, and for that woman, and, you know, you're already over what you know. So the people that have that issue with, I think that seems daunting to eat that amount of protein. I don't think it's that hard at all. But again, to get back what you're talking about, I think that where I see the fat as being the issue, and where I do probably agree with Ted, naming a bit, and certainly a bit more in the female part of this, is that, see, the 3 declining hormones of a woman in late perimenopause of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, all of these hormones have a metabolic effect to some degree. So when they're all coming down fairly quickly with the 49-year-old woman, let's say, the idea there is, this is where you get into a problem with a woman who's trying to do the true ketogenic diet and eat 75 to 80% of her calories from fat to stay in ketosis. Well, with that declining metabolic structure of that changing hormonal landscape, that's just way too much fat. That fat is not going to get burnt. It's going to get stored away somewhere. And so that's where I see them having a real struggle following this diet and saying, I'm doing everything perfectly the way that this thing was set up for the 75% fat, keeping the protein kind of moderately low, and then keeping your carbs really low. I see these women stalling. And how we change that is we push that protein quite a bit up and drop that fat back more to like a moderate level. And when I say moderate level, I think, you know, you see me put out there, really what I'm just talking about is if you can kind of stick with the fat that comes with the protein that you're choosing to eat, whether that be steak or whether that be salmon or whatever it is, you don't really need to add a bunch of cooking fat to that. You just need to put enough in there to, you know, make it not stick to your pan, perhaps. But the idea of going out and seeking extra fat to stick into your diet, at least in the women that I work with, that doesn't seem to be advantageous to their strategy for getting lean at all.
I muted myself. One thing I was trying to figure out, Jay, was, you know, and I suppose I should know this, but I looked this up. When we eat a steak, you know, we're going to get saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, polyunsaturated fat. We're going to get some cholesterol, get some protein, and then, you know, a bunch of other stuff. And the question for me is, you know, like you said, that protein is important for hormones, but we always hear that, hey, cholesterol is important, is important precursor for, you know, all of our sex hormones and vitamin D and so on and so forth. And then I'm saying, well, where's that cholesterol coming from? Is the cholesterol coming from only in the fatty tissue of the meat, or is it also in the lean structural part, the protein part? And my thought is, you know, the muscle cells have a cell membrane, they probably have cholesterol in them. I was trying to get the differences in there, but I mean, you're still getting cholesterol even in leaner cuts of meat, is my understanding to some degree. I don't know if you've looked at that. You may not have, because
Yeah, I'm certainly not up to where I should be on that, but I would agree with you that you're going to be getting the cholesterol from the cell membrane, regardless of your, you know, muscle tissue, whether it be lean or fatty. My understanding is that, you know, since the liver itself produces about 80 to 85% of the cholesterol that we need on a daily basis, regardless of dietary choices, then you're gonna it's going to be hard to not get the rest of that cholesterol that you need from whatever protein source that you're consuming. But at the same time, I don't see people as eating too much cholesterol causing really any type of a problem. So therefore, I'm not big on the whole conversation about low fat diet. I think of it more in terms of energy. So if I would put cholesterol in one box and say, I don't see any problem with the amount of cholesterol that anybody really eats. On the other hand, I think that you can get to kind of that personal fat threshold if you're not an active person, that you can take in enough fat. Even even in eating a very low carbohydrate diet, you can still take in enough fat to push that needle into gaining weight and not doing really any metabolic benefits for you. Is what I see.
Yeah, and the one thing, you mentioned that it's interesting because I just looked up the difference in the amount of cholesterol between a ribeye steak and a sirloin steak, and guess which one has more cholesterol?
I'm thinking you're going to tell me sirloin, and I would have never known that, right?
It is. Actually, the sirloin has more cholesterol, so that was
Isn't
interesting. I
that?
didn't realize that. Sirloin is far more lean than a ribeye, so I guess you're getting that cholesterol probably from the lean tissue, which I thought that's an interesting revelation for me. So I'm learning so much today. Thanks for coming on, Chase. You're making me ask questions.
Yeah. Well, no, you just taught me something too. You just led me to understand something that I have never thought through, and that is why it is that I see so many women actually who are going through hormonal issues doing better on eating some leaner amounts of protein. Because if that's the case, then that extra cholesterol, which is then going to be converted into pregnenolone and then converted into progesterone, and then all the steroid hormones are going to be made, they're actually giving their body a far better building block with going with the sirloin than the ribeye sometimes. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you know, in 2015 dietary guidelines, U.S. dietary guidelines, which most of us think is kind of ludicrous anyway, but they actually even said that cholesterol is no longer a nutrient concern. Eat as much as you want. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference. But it may be a nutrient concern that it actually helps us, and I
Sure.
think that's, that's like, hey, maybe there's a minimum amount that we require. I mean, I've seen studies on, for instance, and this is not within your purview typically, but with multiple sclerosis, there have been a number of, certainly animal studies, and I think there's some human studies also that show that in the absence of exogenous cholesterol, otherwise known as dietary cholesterol, animals were not able to remyelinate the plaques that are occurring in MS, where you're having, those areas where myelin sheaths are being destroyed. And without the exogenous, if they depend upon their endogenous production, they couldn't do it. Now, again, I don't know how much, and you mentioned, and I've heard this quoted many, many times, that we produce 80% of our cholesterol. And I don't know what a mouse does. Maybe there's something smaller. I'm not sure on that. Let me ask you, because you've been somewhat outspoken as I have been about our current situation. We have a society where I think I saw we're going to be soon be approaching 50% of the population obese, not just overweight, but obese. I think something like 80% of all men now, or 75% of all men now, are considered overweight or obese. The women are not much different. We continue just not to fix that problem. And we've just gone through this pandemic where clearly that has exacerbated the outcomes that we've seen. All these comorbidities, and this comorbidity, a lot of people are dying with these comorbidities, or because of the comorbidities in many cases, but we're not addressing that. Is that something that you find perplexing?
I find it just complete bullshit is what I find it. Because if you look at the things like you spoke about that are killing the people, let's just say in the United States, such as diabetes and cancer and cardiovascular disease, and you're looking at that we freely allow the production of hyper palatable foods that do nothing but drive this whole mechanism of hyperinsulinemia, and then it which leads to this terrible amount of cascade of inflammation and hormonal dysregulation. And we've got a huge problem of, you know, and we look for, we're still seem to be looking for the pharmaceutical way out of this thing. And we're also looking at why I'm finding it, and I know you are too, Sean, finding it atrocious that there seems to be a side of the aisle that wants to think that it would be better to protect yourself through things like using multiple unresearched, unscientific injectables into your body than to get your lazy ass up off the couch and go do what you need to do and formulate a diet that would give you nutrient density to protect all of those mechanisms, build your, you know, get your vitamin D levels up through sunshine and eating organ meat and butter and these types of things that aren't getting talked about. Yeah, it's absurd. It's absurd. And I know you feel strong.
Yeah, I mean, and I just sit there and I think, well, you know, the typical answer I get from the people is, well, we tried that. Everybody knows you're supposed to lose weight and it never happens. But I mean, I think the real true effort, and I often, you know, like to use the example of the smoking epidemic we had. You know, if we look at smoking rates, 1954, right. I think we peaked at 45% of our population smoked. We went on a national campaign to say smoking is bad for us, and we've cut that down to where we are standing today is about 14%. So we've cut it, you know, by 66%. Why can't we do that with? I mean, you know, whether you're vegan, whether you're carnivore, whether you're paleo, I think most of the dietary recommendations are saying, you know, we've got to cut out this ultra processed garbage, and that message is not coming out there. In fact, we're giving away free donuts to get your shot. And so, right, what is preventing us from doing that? Do you think it's just pure conflict of interest, or do you think people don't know that? Do you think that our national health authorities don't know that junk food is causing problems?
Well, I tell you, I wish I knew the answer, but where my mind just went to, Sean, when you said that is, I know for a fact, and you do too, that there are still in this day and age, and this blows my mind, there are still gastroenterologists that are telling people with Crohn's disease and IBS and all this other stuff that it doesn't have anything to do with what you eat. So if you've got message, I mean, that one should have been way ahead of what we're then later could have come out and been more of an advocation from doctors about, we have got to get this processed food out of your diet. But if we can't even get doctors to admit that what you eat has anything to do with GI problems, then, I mean, look how far behind the curve we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've got, in this community, probably in this meeting right now, we have somebody with either IBS or ulcerative colitis or Crohn's that's listening. And they literally tell me that their GI doctor said, yeah, diet doesn't make a difference, yeah. And here they are healing themselves with diet. And the doctors are just kind of blind to that, which is really, I mean, it just seems like, because you've got some really, really intelligent people in medicine, and the fact they can't see that really is just kind of disturbing as to how, I guess, the system has sort of beaten any intellectual curiosity out of most people. As you know, as a doctor, you get out of medical school and your nose is to the grindstone. You don't have time to do anything but see patients as fast as you possibly can. And that's something that is a problem. Where do you see, because I know you have kind of you're, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're kind of, you're self-employed, you're out of the main system, I think, a little bit. Where do you see healthcare going in the next 5 to 10 years? Are we going to get more of the same, which is obviously broken? Or are we going to fix this damn thing?
God, I can't speak from the the organization of medicine. I'm so far out of that now. But here's how I want to answer that question. I think that, and this is what's neat about, meeting people like you, is I think what our opportunity is for us to build a strong enough alliance that what we start to promote is that you have got to become self-reliant in your healthcare. You need to get away from that. The answers to your health, lie in this disease management model of healthcare, and start realizing, that the way out for you is that you've got to take some responsibility. You got to become self-reliant in this. And a lot of it is, and you're such a good, positive attribute to the people that I know that follow you, because you show people more that what are the benefits of actually building a lifestyle and a regime like you do, of moving heavy things, eating high density food, and it leads to you have a better quality of life than a lot of people. And so if we're going to win this thing, it's going to be like that. It's going to be us standing up and going, you got to take responsibility. You need to educate yourself. You need to look out to those people that are actually producing results and follow them. And if we do that, I don't know what's going to happen to the other side. Will they always be there for their drugs and surgery? I imagine so, but it wouldn't hurt anybody's feelings if they begin to crumble because people started getting healthier.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be a need for emergency services and,
Sure.
childbirth and pediatric and, trauma and all that stuff. That's not going to go away. Well, just so people don't know, I mean, you had a pretty big health transformation in your own life. I mean, you went from, being, I can't remember how much heavier you were, but you leaned out. Did that change out of your own personal, did it significantly change your perspective on medicine? Because I see a lot of physicians and I look at it and I'm like, you're not, people get mad when you sort of comment on the health of a physician. It should be irrelevant. People say, you can be, we've got this healthy at any size sort of belief, which I think is complete garbage. But did that change your perspective by going, and was it necessary? For me, it was kind of necessary. I didn't realize nutrition lifestyle had such an important role until I was faced with it myself, and then I had to figure that out. And so, How did that affect you?
Well, it tremendously affected me. First of all, I had gotten up to, I don't know where my highest weight was, but it was certainly in the high 270s or so. A lot of inflammation, a lot of depression with that kind of stuff. What it did, though, once I found and started to apply some of the stuff that I learned, and the first book that I ever picked up was more than likely something like Primal Blueprint by Mark Sisson or something, and began to read about that type of approach to eating. Anyway, to answer your question, is now I see it, everything is different, because I see, and it saddens me that people just routinely walk into their doctor's office, have a blood pressure cuff put on them, are told that you're hypertensive, and here's your lisinopril or losartan or whatever it is, and this is just your life. And I know I can't look at it like that anymore, because of what I did for myself, dropped my blood pressure, dropped my blood glucose, did tremendous things. And so I look at it now where this is an opportunity to do something other than to go down to that drugstore and fulfill that prescription and just decide that you've got to take this twice a day for the rest of your life as the way to manage something that is lifestyle related. I mean, there aren't many cases that I ever see that I can't get people off of hypertensive medications. Now, there are some, but for the most part, things like that, things like blood pressure medicine, things like needing to be on metformin because you're not even truly diabetic yet, but you're pre-diabetic. Those are things that there is a path out of that every single day for you based on how you choose to eat and how you choose to move and how you probably choose to think and stuff like that. So yeah, it affected me a lot, and it inspired me that this is the work that I want to do now, because this is about watching people create success stories. And I know that through what you're doing now through Rivera is just that's where it's at. It's you're watching people just contact you after however long they've gone through your protocol and just say, what a life-changing experience this has been, that my joints don't hurt anymore, and I lost 35 pounds, and I sleep at night, and my skin looks better than it ever has. That's the work that's fun to do, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm completely happy with what I get to do in life now. It's a lot of fun. There's some, obviously you're swimming against the stream, but it's a heck of a lot of fun. And I think, in my honest belief, I think all of us that are doing this are going to get the reward that I think we all deserve by making such positive changes in people's lives. And I think that's something that is an important thing. Let me ask you this. So Ted, like I mentioned, Ted's coming on. He's our next guest. He's coming on next week. And one of the things he posted the other day was, hey, I think that body composition is probably the most important metric. And so I want to ask you about, because you like me are sort of favor higher protein diets, in many cases, not always, but many. And one of the things I see, particularly in people that have some history of insulin resistance, either they're currently diabetic, is that protein tends to drive their blood glucose up a little higher than a lower protein diet with more fat. We saw the work of Louis Newberg in the 1920s when he was dealing with these type 1s, and he put them on a very high fat diet, relatively low protein diet, and he had really nice glucose control. And I see people, displaying their perfectly flat CGM scores, and their blood glucose is like in the 60s or 70s all the time. And is that better, or is it better to maybe physically be leaner and have a slightly higher blood glucose? Do you have any thought on that, or is that unknown, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I'll answer what the part of it that I think I've got a pretty good handle around, and that is this. I don't think that people who eat a higher protein diet, who show up with, especially like morning higher blood glucose numbers, is problematic at all. To me, what it means is that your glucagon mechanism is working. And what's happening is that higher protein that you're taking in is releasing glucagon, which is telling your liver to dump stored glycogen. And I think that that's what you want to be happening. And so usually what will happen for these people is they'll say, I keep waking up with a level of 130 or 140, but by the time I eat my first meal of the day and then throughout the day, my sugar levels are down in the between 1 and 110. Well, and they're going, so what is the problem? Like, how dangerous is this? And I'm thinking it's not dangerous at all. It just means that your hormones are working for you, and especially glucagon is doing a good job. So I see it as not problematic. Now, how that relates to how lean a person needs to be, I don't. I'd be if I were speaking on that. That's outside of my wheelhouse. You probably would know far more about that than I do.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, and I've been fascinated with this topic for a number of years now, and I see a lot of diabetics, and it's something. It's because you got guys like Peter Attia saying average blood glucose of 83 is what we want, and Richard Bernstein, who deals with diabetics, he wants it super low, and there's other people saying, well, your blood glucose, like for instance, when I exercise, I think exercise is a good thing, by the way, but when I exercise really intensely, my blood glucose is pretty high, and I'm like, does that mean I shouldn't exercise? And I can't make myself swallow that pill just for the sake of having a flatline blood glucose. And so one of the things is if you look back into the research, in the Eskimo, or, now those are called Inuit, but back from the 20s when they did metabolic research, they saw these Eskimo who were eating on average between, 4, 5, 6 pounds of meat a day. They would have a fasting blood glucose in the 120s. Now, prior to about 1980, they didn't consider diabetes until you had it at 140. And I'm not sure what made it switch around 1980. Was it maybe they wanted to sell more metformin or something? I don't know. But for some reason that number changed to 126 as we currently define it as. And so it is an interesting thing to me. And I don't know. I mean, like I said, I really don't know the answer to this. But my thought is, if I'm staying lean and fit, I mean, that the biomarkers become less of a concern for me to some degree, but not
Sure.
I mean, obviously you say let's have blood glucose at 300 and not care about that. There's a different story.
Right.
You're seeing all the damage from that. So
Well,
interesting.
Sean, let me ask you a question, because I'd like to pick your brain about this one. If you, in light of this conversation we're having right now, what would, if you're looking at a patient, would you prefer them to have, how do I say this? Well, let's just jump into, do you see the benefit of having low fasting insulin as being more important than what on an hourly basis your blood glucose is doing?
I mean, the true answer is I don't know for sure, and I don't think any of us know. I mean, one of the things we know is that our morning fasting insulin is variable. So you can check it one day, it might be 7, one day it might be 3, and one day it might be 12. And so it's not, because when I talked to Jason Fung about that years ago when he was doing a lot of fasting, I said, how often do you measure fasting insulin? Because we were all excited about that. He says, I'm finding it to be very unreliable. It's a very labile metric. And so if you measure it if there's quite a bit of day-to-day variability, you don't know. And so, and obviously our blood glucose changes every friggin' 15 minutes. And so that's something to say. And so this is where I get to, maybe it is about just maintaining lean mass and function and all those things. And these other things are just kind of mentally exhausting to worry about. I think it's important, like when somebody's, I get a lot of diabetics, and I talk, obviously, hey, monitor these things, get a finger stick or CGM or something, and know what your body's doing at certain times. And I think you can say, exercise is generally going to be a good thing, and whether it makes your blood glucose go up or down, and that depends upon the intensity of the exercise largely. High intense sprinting, lifting weights is going to go up, and low steady stuff is going to go down typically. So know what's going on with your body and know why it's occurring, rather than that it's occurring and saying it's always bad. And again, like I said, if I'm going to eat more protein, I'm going to probably wake up with a higher fasting blood glucose, particularly if I eat it later in the day. And is that bad for me? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think there's a certain point where, the research probably quite well as well as the studies on high protein diets, a la guys like Jose Antonio, guys eating 5 grams per kilo and nothing. Their livers are fine, their kidneys are fine. I mean, granted, these are young, healthy guys that are lifting weights, and I think that's part of the equation. Let me just ask you that: do women need to lift weights? Are you a proponent of that? What are your thoughts on strength training in women?
I think that I would say across the board, still I would say yes, but I would say any woman beyond the age of probably 42, I think it's absolutely imperative. I think that if you look at, what some of their biggest risk factors because of the declining of the progesterone, the estrogen, and testosterone are going to be things like osteopenia. Certainly, they're going to be losing muscle mass, and that's going to drop metabolic rate. That's going to make it harder to stay lean. And that also is going to have a direct effect on the nervous system. So I think that that's my go-to with any woman who above the age of 42 is, you can do what you want with cardio, but what you really need to be doing is strength training. You need to be making yourself as strong as you possibly can. And that seems to balance out so many things and remove a lot of risk factors for sure.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that just aren't comfortable. I see, and even within this community, there's a lot of, I'm not going to pick on the women, but there's a lot of women that have never done that. I mean, they've just spent their whole life, and weightlifting has been so foreign to them. It's always been a man thing, and so they're 40, 50 years old, and they're maybe scared and worried about that. And it's something that anybody can do, and we all can do it very easily, even at home. Um, so I want to get back to, because I know some of the women are excited that you're in here, and so I want to make sure I get quote unquote women questions answered if I can. Bioidentical hormones. What's this has gone back and forth for years. Breast cancer, bone loss. I mean, there's all these things where estrogen has a role on. What is the overlying? Do you have an overlying message about hormone regulation in a menopausal woman?
First, I believe that true bioidentical hormone replacement therapy is extremely safe and can be extremely effective. Now, what I find is there's a lot of physicians that I don't agree with the fact that you don't just do a shotgun approach to this type of thing. If you understand a little bit more about how the hormones get moved around, meaning that I would always start a woman who was thinking about BioHRT to consider just using some straight progesterone, probably in a cream-based form, because progesterone is going to be the building block that if your body wants to turn some of that progesterone into estrogen, it'll do that. If it wants to move that progesterone through DHEA and make some testosterone, it will do that. So basically, you're supporting a number of different hormonal pathways with just some simple progesterone. Now, then if it gets into that's not enough to turn off somebody's having massive hot flashes all day long, I see no problem with adding some plant-based estradiol into that progesterone mixture. So I think that one of the things that is that women, what's making this different now, Shawn, is that as the life expectancy continues to go up and up and up, and especially for women, and this is becoming a quality of life issue now, because if you're going to live to be 90 years old, you want your 70s and 80s to be, enjoyable. And certainly there's a benefit to having better hormonal output or structure or, just levels than what was typical at somebody, when people were going to pass away at 60. So it's a different story for a woman to maybe, make that choice of using hormonal replacement therapy. But now it opens up a whole nother possibility and a whole nother area of quality of life for women wanting to be healthy into their 80s and 90s. So I support it most of the time. Now, there are definitely times where you don't even have this conversation. You're not going to take some woman who's got estrogen receptor positive cancer and start talking about let's go with the HRT with this woman. But once you've ruled out some of those complications, I think that there's a use for it.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is a complete kind of an off-topic thing, but it's interesting. I see it. A number of women, not that many, but some, that are now undergoing voluntary bilateral mastectomies based on a BRCA gene. Is that something you have an opinion on or thought? To me, it sounds like maybe there should be some other things you should do, but it seems unusual to me. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a little bit outside what I've come and work with people. I would say it seems very drastic to me. It seems to me that, it's one of those things that's almost like, are these organ systems that we have irreplaceable or not? And it reminds me of like that you really don't need a gallbladder, That's what a gallbladder surgeon will tell you. Is that true that you really don't need a gallbladder? I believe you do. I think that you can live without one, but I think you also need your appendix unless it is poisonous. And I think that your spleen plays a big role, but we're becoming more and more, you can do okay without this. I think it's a drastic measure to say that I'm going to go have a double mastectomy because of, a BRCA gene score, when there are, if you're going to do something that drastic, would you not also, or would you not, consider the possibility that what I'm going to do is I'm going to really clean up my diet, make sure I'm getting exercise, make sure I'm getting out in the sun, make sure that I'm de-stressing my life where I can. That's an option too. So, that's an option also. I'd like to see more women choose that one.
Well, I mean, and I think that goes across board, and not to be insane. I know a lot of women are like, you don't have breasts, you don't know what it's about. I mean, obviously I had someone telling me that because I don't menstruate, I can't have a position on, well, I'm not going to get into something funny, but but the point is, we have people, undergoing gastric bypass surgery, and it's kind of a similar argument. I mean, you're going to, these vertical sleeve gastrectomies are extremely popular right now, and yes, they do result in weight loss, but it comes at a significant cost to the person. Suicide rates, alcoholism, chronic deficiencies, on and on and on. Depression often occurs after this, and yes, maybe the better answer would be less. Let's really focus on diet. And why do we have, I mean, as you see, we've got more and more people that are morbidly obese. And now we're just saying, look, we're just going to accept it. It's just part of life. And you're beautiful as you are. Why are we, what is the part about, because I think we know what to do. It's doable. I think there's not an obese person out there that I believe cannot physically lose weight, if they are able to do the right thing. What is preventing them from doing it, or us as physicians being effective at allowing that to happen? And the answer, again, I don't think the answer is cut everybody's stomach out. What are we missing in the healthcare system that's preventing us from fixing that problem?
So many things, but one of them is the idea of, Tro talks about this pretty well, of we need people to understand that that you've got to get a hold of this thing called satiety in your diet, right? So you need to be able to eat to a point, and then stop eating. Well, that's really, really hard to do when you're eating McDonald's and fries and drinking Coca-Cola. So the answer, and what people can do, it's just a matter of whether they've decided I don't want to do it, is they can go out and experience in a very short period of time, probably by going through, one of your protocols or whatnot, of eating a diet that's, meat-based for a period of time, and having not only all of that nutrient density that will that will handle the ghrelin and leptin kind of balance, but also the production of those ketones that are going to come from burning your own body fat, that are satiating and take that away. We don't have enough of a model where we're teaching people that there is a way to eat that's pleasurable, that's very satiating, and at the same time gets you leaner. And because we're still in, you know what, you deal with it every day, whether or not people lip service that they now kind of get that it might not be about calories in, calories out. There's still the majority of the medical community who believes that, that this whole problem is you don't exercise enough and you eat too many calories. There's a lot more biochemistry going on than that conversation, and that hasn't come forefront enough yet, is what I would think.
Yeah, and it's not despite lack of effort on many people's part, and I think that the satiety aspect is just such an incredibly part of this. If you're I think, I can't remember, was it David Ludwig's book, Always Hungry, kind of addressed this, and we're just not meeting our nutritional goals as a population, to provide satiety, for sure. You remind me, Jay, what you're in? I know the southeast of the country. I can't remember if you're in Carolina or something like that. Where are you? Where are you located?
Right now I'm located in the Dominican Republic, and
okay.
I've been down here for most of COVID, and I'm really enjoying it. And all of my all my work is online through consultations and speaking and stuff through video or whatnot. So I don't know when I'll come back to Charlotte, which is North Carolina's where, that's kind of my home base. But it might not be anytime soon. I'm really enjoying the Caribbean, and it works well for me.
Yeah, I'm jealous now. I'm sitting here in Washington State where it's like 35 degrees outside and looking at the fog out there. But how is it, just out of curiosity, how has the Dominican Republic been with regard to the COVID stuff? Are they having big issues? Are they fairly restrictive, or what's the situation there like?
From what I don't, it's hard to figure out how to mirror it because of being down here and not up there. We did all the things in the beginning that everybody else did. I can remember back in March and April 2 years ago when we had to be inside our house by noon, and then they tried that for a while, and then they went up to 5 o'clock, and you had to wear a mask in everywhere and outside. And, so we went through all of those things. And the interesting thing now is, that's just gone. Like nobody does any of that anymore. And people are back to playing on the beach and just realizing that it didn't hit real hard down here. And a lot of it has to do with, I believe that these people are fairly metabolically healthy. They do eat a higher carbohydrate diet than I would, that you and I might think would be a good idea. But because there's so much fruit, everything is just freshly grown, and all their root vegetables and whatnot. But I tell you what, they're metabolically pretty healthy down here. They get lots of sunshine. They're very active. So it's been easy, and now people are just kind of done with it. I don't see mask wearing. Maybe to go inside a bank, there's still that requirement. But other than that, I think people have just gotten on with their lives, and doing pretty well.
Yeah, I think this kind of gives me a smile to say that you're required to wear a mask to go in a bank when used to be bank robbers.
Right.
It's kind of the opposite.
Right.
Jay, unfortunately, I've got to go in just a couple minutes. There's one question here. I want you to let people know where your links are, your social media, anything you want to share. But there's a question about that Karen's asking about. What are your thoughts on fasting with premenopausal women, and is there a specific progesterone cream that is recommended, I suppose?
Okay. A couple things. So the progesterone's easy. I prefer, there's a company called Bezwecken out of Oregon, and they make a progesterone called Proganol. I just think it's top of the line. It's just done wonders for people for 20 years. So, I haven't changed that. That's my favorite. And you can find that. I'm not sure. I know that you can certainly find it in my pharmacy, which is just on any of my links on social media. You might be able to pick it up through Amazon, but it's called Proganol. And then your other question was, what was that, Sean, about the, fasting. Fasting's a tricky thing. Fasting's a little bit of a tricky thing, I think, for women. And it goes back to this thing where if you're a peri or postmenopausal woman and you're really in a state of decline of some of these metabolic actively hormones, and you push your body into a period of time where you haven't taken in any, probably cholesterol, probably has a whole lot to do with that. But eventually what will happen is that this is going to spike cortisol from the adrenal glands. And if your adrenal glands are already compromised, what I find is you're not getting a whole lot of benefit out of fasting. So what I've seen over the years is, and I'm pretty comfortable with this, I think there's some real benefit in middle-aged women to going up to maybe a 36-hour fast, and probably only doing that, twice a month, and then certainly maybe once a week doing an OMAD or a 24-hour fast. I think there's some benefit to that. But outside of that, I see more problems with women who are trying to do 72 hours and further. I find that it ends up doing more harm than good. So that's just what I'm seeing, and that's observation.
Sure, and those observations are useful. Well, Jake, let folks know how to find you, how to get a hold of you, how to learn more about what you do if they want to consult with you.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, first of all, I'm on social media. I'm pretty active on all of the main Twitter and Instagram, and all of the Facebook and all that. And it's the handle is Hormone Diet Doc. So on any of those social medias, if you just type in @Hormone Diet Doc, you're going to find me. And then I have a website that's just simply drjwrigley.com, and that's where you'll find kind of all of my information about the type of work that I do and how to get in touch with me and things like that.
Well, perfect. Well, thanks, Jay, for being here, and keep up the good work, and we'll look forward for more to come. For the rest of you guys, we'll be back tomorrow. You guys have a great day, and thank you so much.
All right, Sean. Thanks, man.
Bye-bye now.
Join Rivero.health for a 30-day free trial to get access to live Q&A with VIP guests, social community meetings, member discounts, low-carb healthcare providers list, forum, workouts, monthly challenges, early access to podcasts, recipes, carnivore diet guide, fasting guide, shred guide, and much more.